Thank you for doing the exercise. Like I said, I think it's always good to see the why behind things of like, what's the purpose of the resume? Why do we do it like how we tell you to do it? But for those here, who has a resume? Who likes a resume? I got like, it was like, so I got like a point 0.5. So that's okay. So with resumes, I always like to tell people it's not natural to write about yourself on a page or two. It's something like any other skill. The more you learn about it, develop it, over time it's going to get a little bit easier. But again, we need to know what is it? What is the purpose of it? So a resume is used to apply for any job, internship, go ahead. Any job internship opportunities. Typically, they're going to ask for a resume to see what have you done that connects to that position. You may also do it at career fairs. So when you go to career fairs, you're talking to different maybe graduate schools, organizations. They may ask for it. And something unique too for anyone who's in the health professions or wants to do shadowing. What that is that it's where you go and view what someone in your profession does. Sometimes they do ask for that too to get a better sense of who you are. So we know when we use it, but what exactly is it? So the resume is going to be a document that talks about what you've done at your time at TEMU. Now, if you're a freshman, you can have the stuff you've done from high school because they know you're building up on your experience. But as soon as you're a sophomore, at that point, you want to start taking it off because when you start applying for internships and jobs, they're going to care about what you did at TEMU. So anytime you're applying for a job on campus, off campus, you'll usually use a resume. What's unique about the resume, it's tailored to each job you're applying for. We'll talk more about at the end, but a resume you use for an on-campus job is going to look different than after you graduate, right? Because you would have built up on a lot of experience, and those are two different positions. Resumes are also a lot shorter. So resumes are typically 1 to 2 pages long. The reason why is because with this example, we only had 2 resumes. On average, when somebody gets a job application, they usually get minimum maybe 100 to 200 resumes. So they have to go through these really fast. So if you have a 6-page resume, they may not get to it, or they may not even get past that first or second page because they have to go fast through it. So you want to be very specific to that position you're applying for. So the resume really shows who you are as a professional. Now, I want to talk about the curriculum vitae or the CV because sometimes this gets brought up depending on what path you're going down. So anyone heard of a CV before? So CVs, these are documents that you'll use if you want to go be a professor, go into research. They're more focused on academics and research based. So because they're focused on academics versus the resume where it's very concise, it's like 2 pages, your CV, you just keep adding to it. So when you see like your professor's CVs, they're usually like 10 pages long because it's everything they've ever written, presented, every class they taught, all that just keeps going on. But again, we only really use this if you want to stay in academics or want to go into research. Also graduate and professional school. So if you're interested in going to master's, doctorate, some kind of health program, usually they may ask more for a CV style because they want to see everything that you've done throughout TEMU. So this is going to be more about your scholarly identity versus your professional identity. Questions about both? So what I'm going to talk about today, we're going to go through 3 different points. I'm going to be honest, I don't know if I was hungry when I made this, but I'm also a very visual person. So I wanted to give a representation of how you can think about the resume because there's layers to it. So when we think about the resume, a lot of times when people first create it, it may be very like, hey, I'm just going to put it together really quick. I'm going to say one and send it out. You can do that, but when you apply for positions, you probably are going to take the risk of not getting calls for interviews because again, there's layers to the resume. So we're going to first talk about the format because that really is that first representation of the resume. Think about this at the bottom button. If your bottom button's not holding everything, your hamburger can go everywhere. Next, we're going to talk about the bullet points and why they're important. That's really that middle section of the meat, veggie patty, whatever you prefer, but it is really the heart of the resume. And then last, the tailoring part or the toppings. So this is where it's going to be really flexible in how do you make your resume way that's a good reflection for that role you're applying for. Okay, so we have two different formats here. I know they're a little bit blurry, but I want you to take a second and look at both. One on the left side, it is more what we call a modern resume. Has a picture, has color, has a bar graph, has the two columns. And then the other one is more traditional style. Which one do you say you all should use? Traditional? Anybody like the modern? The colors? So then the traditional one? So the answer is going to depend. So when it comes to applying for jobs, typically if you don't know who you're applying to and you're applying online, I'm going to recommend the more traditional. The reason why is because especially for full-time jobs, when you apply for a job, a lot of bigger companies use something called an applicant tracking system. Has anyone ever heard of that? What it is let's say here at TAMU. So when you apply for an on-campus job as a staff student, there's that Workday. Workday is an applicant tracking system. What the role of that system is to review resumes, to filter out which ones are most like the job description that was given to the software. It's to help the human resource department, which is the department that reviews applications, filter through those 100 or 200 resumes. So it helps them, it hurts the people sometimes who are applying, because if you don't know about the applicant tracking system, and let's say you're sending more of a modern resume, because it's a software, it doesn't do a good job reading more modern resumes. Like with double columns, I've seen it that it'll take the profile and put it on your education section. It may take employment history and put in your skills because the software reads from right to left. Also, bar graphs like this, it's not gonna pick up on there. So if you're applying online, I would say be more cautious and have something like this, because even though it's not as appealing, it's gonna pick up on the format of, the software is gonna pick up on the format easier. Now, for a more modern style, let's say you're going to a career fair or you're going to email somebody your resume, that's when I say, okay, then you can use more of that modern style because you know it's going directly to a person. The only thing I wouldn't keep on this is the picture. So nowhere should you ever have your picture on your resume. The reason why is because for human resource individuals, it can be an issue because they don't want to have any bias while they're looking at different resumes. So that's why I say it depends. It also depends on your industry. I'm looking at everyone I know for the majority. We have a lot of like psychology, business, health. No one's in art, right? So with everyone here, your industries are more traditional. So they're not typically going to have more of that modern style. If you were going into like art, graphic design, then something like this may be more beneficial because it's a representation of what you're going to do. But everyone else's career fields are more on the traditional side. So have for sure traditional resume format, and then this one will be optional. Questions on this? Okay, so next we're going to go through quickly some of the sections that you'll have. These are going to be, the first couple ones are going to be consistent. Like every resume you do, you'll have it. So first is going to be your contact information. You have to have your name, cell phone number. Make sure that you have your voicemail ready to go. So like, let's say you have your voicemail, but you're like, I've never put it on, or I don't even know if it has my name. Make sure you do that. It just makes it easier for somebody contacting you. And I would say, especially when you're applying for positions that are really competitive, you don't want to give anyone a reason not to follow up with you. Because if it's really hard to contact you, they can find your name, they can find your email. Especially nowadays with the job market being really tough, they'll move on to the next person. So you want to give yourself the best chance and make sure you activate email, activate voicemail, and have a professional email. I know the professional email may sound like, hey, everybody has that, but even I, when I've done resumes, I've seen some things. I've seen like Batman, girl something, GURL, like just things, and these are sometimes for full-time positions. So again, if I don't know you and I'm seeing Batman 25, like I'm glad you like Batman. I'm not sure, like I'm a little concerned with like how you're gonna be as a professional. And I know it sounds harsh, but that's just the reality when you're looking through resumes really quickly. So you want to make sure you're putting that professional stance. Now your address. So your address, you only need to put city and state. You don't have to put the full address like 4600 University Boulevard. You just put Laredo, Texas. If you're planning on moving after graduation, like your goal is like, hey, I really want to go to San Antonio, or maybe I want to go to a different state. What I would probably recommend is taking off the city or address or putting parentheses willing to move, just so they know like you're actively trying to get to that place. And lastly, this one's optional, but if you have like a LinkedIn URL or e-portfolio, this depends on your major. Some majors may have more things that they do that they can put online that they can showcase for future jobs. Like for teaching, you could have like a teaching e-portfolio into there. That's something that you can put, so it's that added extra thing that you can have that someone can see your additional work. And then after contact information is going to be your education. So since you're still at TAMU, your education is going to be on top. Once you graduate, it's going to move to the bottom. You don't have to put your high school though. So the only one you have to have is A&M, International University, or if you went to LC or you went to a different community college. Or if you went to a community college and you got an associate's degree, you can put that information after Texas A&M International University. You'll have your degree, the month and year you're going to graduate, and then GPA is optional. If you have a 3.0 and want to put it, you can. If it's a below a 3.0, I would probably wait till you pick it back up. So after those two sections, the next section, we're going to go to that middle part, the most important part, is going to be the experience section. So the experience section, so what you're going to see is the resume I'm passing out. This is actually from Career Services. This is going to give you an example of what the experience section looks like. Now, this section is really important because I'll be honest, when I look at resumes, like I may look at some other stuff really quick, but I'm going to this section first because again, I got to see how you're a good fit for the job or the internship I have. So with the experience, what the format looks like for this is you'll put the company name. So I'm gonna take Joyce for instance, because Joyce works at our office and she's also pro. So company name, Joyce for her resume may put Texas A&M International University. After, on top the job title, outreach student worker, the date she's been here, and then Joyce is going to put bullet points about what she does at her office. Now, sometimes you may see on the resumes that they do paragraphs instead of bullet points. I would not recommend that. The reason why is because when you're going through it really quickly, people, when you see paragraphs, think about when you're reading for class. When you see a paragraph, right, you scan through it or like ignore it. Same thing happens when it comes to resumes. People see paragraphs or mine just like, I'm going to skip over it. Bullet points are a lot easier to read. Now, what you put in those bullet points is each bullet point is a specific task you did in that role. So for Joyce, for instance, right now she could talk about like, hey, like I helped organize the Rectal Legal workshop. I helped with our front desk. So with the bullet points, in the resume, you'll never say like, I need my day. You start off straight with the verb. So, presented in front of 30 students. Coordinated with a team of 5. So you'll start off straight with the task. And with the bullet points too, if you're in the position, the verb's going to be in the present tense. Teach, oversee, mentor. If you are no longer in the position, it's going to be in the past tense. Mentor, taught, oversaw. With the bullet points, because this is the most important part of the resume, you want to make them detailed enough where, let's say, like, I don't have experience with criminal justice, but if I read somebody's resume who did an internship with criminal justice, I would still get a good idea of what they did. You want it detailed enough where someone can understand, but you don't want it too detailed where it ends up being a paragraph. So you want it in that balance of like each bullet point one task. So this is an example of a bullet point. So let's say if I'm thinking about mentorship and I'm trying to write the bullet point, I could just write talk to students, right? But that's not going to give that person a lot of detail. So if I can think about numbers, detail, specifics, I can rearrange this to say, mentored 10 students. How did I mention them? I provided academic support. What happened with that? 100% of the students returned in the spring semester. So when we read that, right, that's a lot stronger. So when I'm reading that, I want to be like, I want to invite this person in for an interview because I want to talk about like, how did they do that? But if I make that bullet point very brief and just say like, hey, I talked to students, that's nice. But if I'm having to look at a resume and compete with other people, it may not be strong enough against another person. So with the experience sections, the nice thing is it's very unique to you. So there's different experience sections that you can have. So we can see on this one, there's 2 different experience section titles. So this is really going to come down to you and depend on what you've done. For some students, I know they're highly involved on campus. So they may have a leadership experience and write all the clubs that they're in that they're leading. Somebody else may have a lot of internship experience. So that's what they'll put, volunteer work experience. So when you look at resumes, especially when you start talking with your friends, it's good to get feedback and ideas. But at the end of the day, you always have to be self-reflective for the resume because my resume is going to look different from yours and everybody else's because we all have different experiences. But you have that ability to make your resume the way that's going to be the best reflection of you. So on this resume, we talked about the experience. Really quick, you'll see activities on the bottom. So the way this activities is formed is just listed. So when we talk about the bullet points are the most important part. So you want to put bullet points to experiences that you can talk a lot about. Now, especially as freshmen, transfer students, you may just be joining some organizations, or volunteer events. You may be like, hey, I just joined the Pre-Dental Society, but I've been doing it. That's okay. You can format it more like this, where you list it, put the date, but you don't put bullet points because you can't right now, because you're still building up on that. But let's say next semester, you're like, hey, I actually became the secretary. Now I'm going to move it up here and put bullet points. So your resume is always updating and changing. And again, we want to do that because the more experience we get, the more we get involved. We should be adding to it to have that for the future. Now, for skills, I wanted to add this section because this is a section I usually get a lot of questions about. So with the skills section, you usually just want to have what we call hard skills. So that could be skills you could easily show someone. So languages, being bilingual, software, hardware. This is going to depend more on your industry. If you're in more of the engineering tech side, you'll usually see this a lot more because they want to know what programs, what kind of software that you know. Or if certifications. So if you have a specific certification, CPR certified, and you go into the health industry, that would be good to show them. But we can see with all these if I ask someone like, hey, show me your certification, please speak in a different language so I can see that you know, you could easily show them. Now, there are other skills that are just important that are called interpersonal skills. Those are like teamwork, communication, leadership. Those are just as important, but they're harder to show someone on the spot, right? So they should be more reflected in your bullet points. So that mentorship bullet point, for instance, not only could I see that that person could mentor someone, but I also saw that they were really successful and probably had really great tutoring skills because they were able to do the academics. That's something that I may not have thought about, but I'm like, hey, that might be really nice to have as somebody coming into this role. Okay, so we did the middle part. Now we're going to the last part, the tailoring. Now, remember how I told you this is going to be like the toppings is going to be all individualistic because every job position is different and everyone likes different toppings on the burgers. So when you're applying for jobs, what tends to happen is that people may use the same resume for every type of job. And like I said in the beginning, you can do that, but your chances of getting an interview really slim down because one, the applicant tracking system, what it's usually doing is looking at the job description that's given to it, and it's trying to see which resume is most like it. And it's trying to pick up on the keywords, tasks that it has on there. So you may be a great fit, just like TAMU Student 1. That person may be a great fit, but because they can't see it, it's not going to move them on to that next stage. So what we want to do is that each time you apply for a role, especially when you start getting to your internships and full-time job, you want to tailor your resume. So what that means is that you want to look at the job description and everything that it asks for, make sure that you, if you have done it, you do include it in your resume. It's really easy too when you're looking at a job description to realize like, hey, like I've done this, I just don't have it right now on my resume. So let me go and add it in there. An example, so if you're applying for an on-campus job right now your focus on the experiences is probably going to be like customer service, work experience. So maybe you're really highlighting your experience from working at Walmart or working at a fast food restaurant, because a lot of that will transfer over to the jobs here. But let's say you're about to graduate, you're looking for your first time role. Not that those jobs won't be important, but the other experiences that you have are going to be more relevant. So your internships that you have, your leadership, the projects that you've done in class, those should take up more room on your resume because they connect more to that job. Questions about Taylor? Okay. So I know that was an overview of the resume. I wanted to give you a foundation of just knowing, like, again, what's the purpose? What are those different sections? I hope after today that everyone who's like, I don't know about my resume, it moves up to like, hey, like, at least I know the steps. Now I'm going to get to the point that I'm going to be confident about it. That's the most important thing. So when it comes to jobs, at the end of the day, it comes down to confidence. So you have to have your resume and be very comfortable like giving it out and being comfortable talking about it because you're the one going to those interviews, right? So if right now you're like, hey, my resume maybe is not my favorite, that's okay, but let's get it to a place where you feel very confident, you feel good about it. So when you're giving it to someone, you're very like, hey, I'm good to go. So these are different resources. You are incorrect, amigo. You're already getting that resource. This is something that if you ever want me to look at your resume, you have questions, I'd be more than happy to review it with you. Career Services also does it as well. So you just have double the resources. Career Services will also help with choosing a major, interview prep, searching for internships and jobs. Now, I wanted to put some events up here that you could potentially use your resume. One is actually today, so it's a TAMU Graduate School Fair. Is anyone going to that one? Okay. So it's actually going to be today at Zaffarini from 5 to I think 7. It's all TAMU's graduate programs are going to be there. It's open to all students. So even if you're like, hey, I'm a sophomore, I'm not ready for graduate school yet, it's still good to go just look and see like what opportunities are offered at TAMU. They're already setting up, so I saw that they have all the tables downstairs. So that's something that I found on campus. When I attend, it'll be from 5 to 7 in Zaffarity. All majors career fair. So all majors, graduate school, and school districts career fair. This is hosted by Career Services. Typically, they're in the ballroom at the student center. What the setup looks like is that in the ballroom, there's different tables. And let's say for the all majors career fair, they'll have different businesses and organizations who are either there talking about internships or jobs. Again, you may not be in the season to be like, hey, I'm actually not looking for an internship or job right now. I always recommend for students, if you can, try to go to these events before you actually need to look for something. The reason why it's going to take some of the questions and the fear away. Because when we do something new, right, especially going to a fair, we may not know what it looks like. And then we're adding the added pressure of like, I have to get a job or internship by next semester. That's already that additional like maybe stress you're adding on. Versus now, if you go and you're like, hey, I don't need it, I just want to like see what it looks like. You go, you talk to people, you get an idea of what it is. You never know, you may find something, and you're like, didn't know about this. When you do look for the internship or career the next semester, you've already done this. So you're like, hey, I already know what the layout looks like, so I just need to go have my resume and talk to people. And then the last one I'm going to talk about is the All Majors Networking event. So this is actually something that Proyecto Amigo, Career Services, and the Alumni Association were hosting for students. We did it last semester. So what it looked like is that we were in, actually we're in the business building. We were in the ballroom over here, and we had different professionals come out. We had a lawyer, people from nonprofits, public health, but we did like a speed networking event. So there was tables, we gave the students like 10 minutes to talk to each professional, and then they moved to the next table. So students got to really meet people from all different industries. What was cool is that some of the students made really good connections where even someone would ask like, hey, tell that student to send me their resume. We had a really great connection. I have an internship or I have a job. So that's going to be another event that we'll host on November 7th. I'll send it out to the Proyecto Amigo students. We're still finalizing the flyer. But with that, you for sure can have your resume because you never, again, know who you'll meet that may ask for it. Okay, you all know where Proyecto Amigo is, so this is more for students who are new to Proyecto Amigo. But I want to take a pause here and ask how you all are feeling. What are your thoughts, questions?